Hey everyone, welcome to What If? Today you're in for a treat because we're taking you on a world tour. Well, maybe more of a solar system tour to be exact. We're heading out to space to tour the rocky planets. I'm talking Mars, Venus, and Mercury. And the best part is, you get to do it from the comfort of your own home. Now, for our first story, I'm going to send our buddy Chase on the mission. So if anything goes wrong, at least he's the one getting hurt. I can't wait to see the look on his face when he finds out. Now, visiting these planets could be an absolute nightmare for humans. Yeah, you could blame it on the atmosphere or the lack of atmosphere, but don't forget, humans can be downright reckless. I'm talking about you, Chase. Is his head gonna blow off? Will he freeze to death? Or will we end up ruling these planets and building giant futuristic cities with thousands of Martian babies crawling around them? Well, you're about to find out. Ah, Mars, the red planet, and our potential new home. Well, Mars isn't as hospitable as it sounds. It's really inhospitable. It might be a balmy 20 degrees Celsius during the day, but at night, the temperatures can drop to minus 153 degrees Celsius.
Okay, if you don't know what minus 153 degrees Celsius is, it's intensely cold. It's like minus 243 degrees Fahrenheit. It's the type of temperature that will give you frostbite in seconds. In minutes, you'll die from hypothermia. Seriously guys, learn the metric system. Also, we do the conversion for you in the closed captions.
And if you think Uranus smells bad, well, that's because you haven't been to Mars yet. Yeah. The red planet smells like rust and gunpowder.
But when I wear my helmet, all I smell is me, and I smell pretty good. Most of the time.
Well, you wouldn't be able to breathe on Mars anyway. The planet barely has any atmosphere. Most of it is carbon dioxide with only trace amounts of oxygen. Luckily, this time we aren't sending you to Mars. We've decided to sacrifice Chase for this mission.
What did you mean by sacrifice?
I mean send. We sent Chase up to set up a base on Mars and report back. Hey, he made it! Welcome to the Red Planet.
Kinda nothing here, huh? I thought there'd be more stuff, you know, Rico? Any ideas?
I detect no breathable air, high levels of radiation exposure, low pressure and frequent dust storms. If you want to survive on Mars, you must build a habitat.
Great idea. How long will that take?
With the materials you transported aboard the Starship, I calculate it will take about 3 months to assemble a simple base.
That's not so bad. I better get moving.
Now, building a habitat on Mars wouldn't be so simple. It's got to be airtight and insulated to protect Chase from radiation and Martian dust storms. It also needs to have a sustainable life support system to manage air, water, and waste. And, of course, Chase will need to get power from solar panels.
You don't want to know where I get my drinkable water from. But I'll tell you anyways. I could extract water from the Martian soil or atmosphere, but it's so much work. Instead, I recycle water from things like sweat and pee. I just try not to think about it.
The sensors are picking up a micrometeorite headed straight for the base. Potential hazard detected.
Don't sweat it, Rico. We got enough water. Base is fine. I built it myself. Here, let me give you a tour of my crib. Welcome to the fanciest pad on the planet. Over here is where I sleep. And over here is where I eat. And over there is a window. And this is my luxury first aid corner, in case I get hit by like a dust storm. Those babies travel at like 100 km/h. They could easily slice through my spacesuit. Oh, you gotta see my Michelin star greenhouse. It's 5 stars because it's rated out of this world. It's my favorite place in the base. Only thing is, I had to build it unattached to my main living quarters because Rico forgot to include a tunnel in the first base plan. So now every time I gotta go check on my plants, I have to go outside. It's exhausting. That's why I don't bother to take off my helmet when I pop into my habitat. I'm all about efficiency. Plus, it's a lot to animate, actually. Check out these potatoes. They look pretty good. Take that, Matt Damon.
Micrometeorite is approaching the base. I calculate the chance of it striking the habitat as 87.42%.
Rico, silencio, por favor. I'm recording a YouTube video, my friend. Come on, and what did I tell you? Round the numbers. Okay, where was I? Oh, yeah, potatoes. It takes a lot of work to grow anything on Mars. Taters aren't my first choice. I'd grow burgers if I could, but we work with what we got. I keep my greenhouse nice and pressurized and at a comfy temperature of 16 degrees Celsius. And for those of you who hated the recycled pea stuff, you're gonna love this next part because as a fertilizer for the Martian soil, I use a super special ingredient, my poo. Not because I'm a sicko, but because Martian soil is literally garbage, figuratively speaking. It smells pretty bad in here. Ugh, but at least it doesn't smell as bad as Uranus.
Danger. Micrometeoroid has breached the habitat. You must go there immediately.
What? Ah, damn meteoroid. Sorry guys, I gotta go check this out.
Your helmet has sustained minor damage.
This is my favorite helmet. Rico, do I have a spare somewhere?
You have an extra helmet, but I have bad news.
Uh-huh. What? What now?
The extra helmet is back at the habitat.
Of course. Of course it is. Are you kidding me? 3 months on Mars! And I just finally start getting this thing working and Mars has to ruin everything! Well, at least I have tape around here somewhere. Be back in a minute. Here, this should work. Rico, how's that storm looking?
Not good. A dust storm of this type, it can last for days.
Oh, great. That leaves me no choice. If I don't make it back in time, I'll lose everything and die. And I can't die now. I just finished building this sweet, sweet bachelor pad.
It's only a 5-second walk for you to reach your living quarters.
Okay, come on. It's only 5 seconds. You can do this, Chase. You can do this. Get your head in the game, boy. This helmet is useless. I'll go without it. 5 seconds to get back home. I can handle a little bit of frostbite.
I highly advise you don't do this.
Okay, well, if I don't make it, I'll see you guys on my next adventure. Chase out.
Looks like the atmospheric pressure killed him before the frostbite could. Didn't I say going out there without a helmet was a bad idea? Yeah, don't try this on your own. And don't worry, Chase will be fine. It's kind of his thing. He dies. A lot. But he always returns for another adventure. In the past few billion years, Earth has been pummeled by asteroids, crashed into other planets, and frozen over several times. Not to mention being ruled by all kinds of crazy life forms. Sometimes it's a wonder that our blue homeworld has survived it all. But if we want to take a whirlwind tour of our planet's history, we'll have to start way back at the very beginning. Some 4.5 billion years ago, our solar system began to emerge out of a dense cloud of interstellar gas and dust. This cloud collapsed into a swirling disk of matter that got hotter and hotter and hotter until hydrogen fused into helium. And just like that, our sun was born. And baby Earth was on its way too. After the birth of our star, all the matter on the farthest ends of the spinning disk began to clump together. These clumps would be the seedlings for the planets and moons in our solar system. As they accumulated more matter, they grew bigger and more spherical. The clumps in the cooler regions of the solar system were mostly made of ice, liquids, and gases. Closer to the Sun, all the rocky material formed the inner planets like Mars and Earth. This young Earth was incredibly active, volcanically speaking. It spewed out gases like hydrogen sulfide, methane, and carbon dioxide. These gases made up the very first atmosphere on our planet. Early Earth was constantly bombarded by large asteroids and comets, and soon Earth experienced an even more violent collision. Theia, a planet the size of Mars, slammed right into our young world. This epic collision threw chunks of matter all around Earth's orbit, and then gravity bound them together into what we know now as the Moon. On this hot, early Earth, there were no oceans. All water existed as gas. But 3.8 billion years ago, our planet cooled enough for water to condensate and become liquid. The very first primitive ocean covered this young Earth and turned it into a water world. H2O is an essential ingredient for creating living things, so with all that water, life appeared on Earth about 3.7 billion years ago. These earliest forms of life were microscopic organisms, but it was nearly a billion years after that some of these organisms changed the course of the world. Earth didn't stay as a water world very long. Soon, the very first continents emerged from the ancient ocean. Scientists call them cratons. As more and more land rose from the ocean, the very first supercontinent appeared on the planet. Valbara wasn't exactly a supercontinent, it was pretty small. Scientists think it was smaller than the continent of Australia. Around 2.4 billion years ago, cyanobacteria evolved to become our planet's first photosynthesizers. Finally, we had some oxygen producers to make Earth's atmosphere much more hospitable. And the rest is history, folks. Just kidding, we've still got a long way to go. With all this new oxygen, Earth's atmosphere had much lower levels of carbon dioxide. And that made the planet icy cold. Much of our young world froze over as Earth saw its first ice age. Now, as Earth's atmosphere was changing, the continents were moving too. They broke up and reassembled into the next supercontinent, Rodinia. Rodinia was a real supercontinent. It may have been the largest supercontinent to ever cover the planet. And life? Well, life finally became more complex. But then something happened. Rodinia broke apart and a new supercontinent assembled. This one was called Pannotia. Then, between about 540 and 485 million years ago, there was an explosion of new life. This time was called the Cambrian explosion. And the animals that evolved during this period had hard body parts, like shells or spines. The most famous of all were the alien-looking trilobites. Around 440 million years ago, the climate suddenly shifted and the temperature of the ocean changed dramatically. Earth saw its first mass extinction event. This was the Ordovician Silurian extinction, and a majority of the life that had been spreading around the planet vanished. Many of these life forms laid the foundation for the ecosystems that we have on Earth today. Somewhere between 420 to 350 million years ago, the first trees arose from Earth's soil. And the first animals made their way to land, too. 250 million years ago, the planet was covered by our last vast supercontinent, Pangaea. Sadly, it was also during this period that Earth witnessed the greatest mass extinction event in our history, the Great Dying. Huge amounts of greenhouse gases and accelerated global warming wiped out about 90% of all species on Earth. But this mass extinction helped pave the way for the next wave of animals to evolve. 240 to 230 million years ago, the first dinosaurs appeared. For the next 150 million years, they'd rule the land. If you were there, you'd have witnessed the gigantic sauropod Argentinosaurus, the largest land animal ever. Or you might have been chased by one of the Earth's greatest apex predators, the T-Rex. And you'd also witnessed Pangaea breaking up and forming the continents we know today. Okay, you may already know where this is headed. 66 million years ago, an asteroid slammed into our planet, right where Mexico sits now. And it coughed up so much debris into the atmosphere that it blocked out the sun. This led to devastating climate changes that caused the dinosaurs to die out. In the next wave of emerging animals, mammals became more common. Around 6 million years ago, the earliest known humans started walking this world. This species was called Sahelanthropus, though they still likely walked on all fours. 4 million years ago, early humans began to walk upright, and about 1 million years later, they developed the first known tools, which they used to break things. Some 800,000 years ago, things sparked. These early humans discovered how to control fire and could now cook food and provide themselves with heat. Their brains continued to evolve, now more rapidly than ever. These humans learned to interact with each other and the surrounding world in whole new ways. Then, between 40,000 to 15,000 years ago, all other human species besides Homo sapiens went extinct. 10,000 years ago, Earth saw its earliest farmers. These previously nomadic humans stopped wandering the planet and finally put down their roots. Jumping way forward to about 250 years ago, the Industrial Revolution took place. We went through major technological, socioeconomic, and cultural transformations. Rural-based farm societies became more industrialized urban ones. Our human population continued to grow. By 1804, we reached 1 billion. By 1927, we'd hit 2 billion. And since the 1960s, the global population has risen faster and faster to where it is now, at over 8 billion people.
I'm not sure if I heard that right in the first video. Chase recycles his pee for water? What is wrong with that guy? Okay, moving on. Some people call Venus the hell planet, and others call it the planet of love. Might be good, might be bad. Well, we're going to take the 50-50 chance and send Chase there for his next adventure. Now, if I'm being honest, I don't get how Venus could be all that romantic. The air is insanely poisonous, and stepping foot on that place would easily turn you into ashes. Not your ideal destination for a dinner date. Then again, it does rain a lot, and that could be romantic, right? Well, you may not know this, but Venus has the potential to become a human colony. I mean, it would still take a lot of work, but some aspects of the planet are suitable for humans. You'll see.
Welcome to hell! Yeah, sorry, I meant Venus. Welcome to Venus. Some say it's Earth's twin, but this world is nothing like home. And you're about to experience this scorching hot landscape firsthand. Your mission is to spend 5 seconds on this hellish planet. And trust me, these are going to be a very long 5 seconds. Venus is the second planet from the Sun and our nearest neighbor. At its closest approach, Venus is a mere 40 million kilometers away from us. After just 4 months in space, you'd finally be able to witness this beautiful but deadly planet up close. 4.5 billion years ago, Venus and Earth formed in the same corner of our solar system. This space rock is about the same size as Earth, and its gravity is similar too, but unlike our home, the surface situation on Venus is extreme. We know this because we've sent probes to this scorching world. Some probes orbited it, some made a flyby, and some even landed on the surface of Venus, but those didn't last very long. What happened to them? Well, that's what you're about to find out. Time to make your way down to the surface. Don't these clouds look beautiful? Well, don't inhale them. These yellowish bands streaking across the sky are clouds of sulfuric acid. If you could only get a whiff of them, you'd smell the reek of rotten eggs. But to do that, you'd need to remove your helmet, and I definitely do not recommend that. At a height of 50 kilometers above the surface, visibility is poor. You'd hardly be able to see anything. The incredibly thick atmosphere would block views of this planet and its tens of thousands of volcanoes. The atmosphere is mostly made up of carbon dioxide, and because it's so thick, it traps heat on the planet's surface, keeping it nice and toasty. Just how toasty are we talking? You're gonna find out the hard way. As you descend another 15 kilometers, the haze would begin to clear. The world below would finally reveal itself. A rust-colored surface covered in mountains and volcanoes. Looks like this volcano is still active. You'd fly around a little to collect some samples and take in the view. Yep, the atmosphere is mostly carbon dioxide with traces of nitrogen. That checks out. Okay, well, let's see if you can land here. This looks like the spot.
Mission Control, am I clear for landing? Mission Control? Looks like there's no signal. Initiating the landing sequence without clearance. Fingers crossed.
Landing your spacecraft would kick up clouds of dust that would take several minutes to settle down in the soupy atmosphere. As it clears, you'd look up into the sky, but you wouldn't find the familiar yellow circle of the sun. On Venus, it always looks like dawn, no matter what time of day it is. That's because the Venusian atmosphere only lets about 10% of the sunlight that hits it reach the surface. But wait, what were we saying earlier about the space probe that landed on Venus? Oh yeah, Venera 13. This Soviet probe made its fatal landing back in 1981. It survived the descent and lasted for a whopping 127 minutes. That's longer than any other spacecraft that had made it to the surface. But then, Venera 13 gave way to the violent, uninviting environment of this hell. It was likely crushed under extreme pressure. Or it melted. But it's too late to turn around now. You've lived through the 1-hour-long landing, and you're so close. All you need to do to complete your mission is to spend 5 seconds out there. Yeah, out there. In the most extreme environment you've ever been to. You made it! Whoa, the atmosphere is so strange. You can hardly lift your arms. Even though Venus has about the same gravity as Earth, you'd be feeling the sheer weight of its immensely dense air. It would feel like you were walking through water. Very hot water. And you'd be glad you were wearing so much protective gear. A quick look at your thermometer would tell you that it's a sweltering 475 degrees Celsius out here. That's hot enough to melt lead. Your pressurized suit would be working hard to keep you safe. Without it, you'd be crushed under all that pressure before you could even complete your mission. This isn't so bad after all. Hey, if a spacecraft could last over 2 hours, some 40 years ago, well, you and your shiny new gear can survive longer, right? Venus is right here for you to discover. Just take a few more steps. Suddenly, something distracts you from the first ever first-hand human analysis of Venus's surface conditions. Your protective suit breaks. The drastic pressure shift would immediately make you feel like you were deep underwater. With an atmospheric pressure 90 times that of Earth, Venus would be crushing you from all directions. At the same time, you'd be struggling to breathe in an atmosphere without any oxygen. Any atmosphere you did manage to inhale would scald the inside of your mouth and the top of your throat. Unless you could scramble very quickly back to the safety of your spacecraft, you'd be dead within seconds. Martians might really exist in the future. But instead of the aliens of sci-fi movies, Martians would be humans, born and raised on Mars. And in this episode, you're one of them. Why would your skin be orange? Would you be a different species? And would you ever be able to visit Earth? This is What If, and here's what would happen if you were born on Mars. Some of our previous episodes have already looked at what it would take to live on Mars, but that's only half the story. To create a stable settlement on the Red Planet, people would have to start having babies. How many people would we need to create a healthy, non-inbred population? Well, some say we'd only need 98 people, but others say we'd need a minimum of 10,000. But regardless of the size of the breeding population, it would only take a few generations before we started seeing a huge difference between Earthlings and Martians. Mars is the most Earth-like planet in the solar system, but it's not exactly like the Earth. Its gravity, atmosphere, and magnetic field would create serious challenges for human life. And challenges often go hand in hand with evolution. Children on Earth are born with up to 120 genetic mutations. Move those babies to Mars, and they would start having mutations suitable for Martian living. And those mutations would likely pass on to their children. By the time we settle on Mars, we'll probably have the ability to modify our own genes, putting Martian evolution on the fast track. So, if you were born in the third or fourth generation of Martians, you would be a lot different than you are today. But what are the main reasons why your body would change? Well, first, there's gravity. Mars only has 1/3 of Earth's gravity, so your bones wouldn't experience the same force. Your bones would lose their density and become more brittle. Breaking them would become a common issue. Then there's the atmosphere. On Earth, you're used to a dense atmosphere that mostly contains nitrogen and oxygen, but on Mars, you'd be experiencing a thin atmosphere that's mostly carbon dioxide with only trace amounts of oxygen. You wouldn't be able to evolve a whole new respiratory system, but you could develop other ways of dealing with the lack of oxygen. Like you could have denser capillaries that are more efficient at moving blood and transporting oxygen to your muscles. But even with these advances, you'd still have to live underground or in a thickly insulated house to survive the harsh atmosphere. And since life on Mars would be confined to small spaces, Martians wouldn't need to be able to see far into the distance. Yeah, you would be born nearsighted. And finally, there's the radiation. Earth has a strong magnetic field that protects us from lethal solar radiation, but Mars has a weak magnetic field that's scattered along the planet. On Earth, our bodies produce melanin. It protects us from the radiation that does make it through Earth's magnetic field, but the radiation on Mars would be much stronger, and melanin just wouldn't cut it. Instead, your skin would produce carotenoids. This pigment would help protect you against skin cancer by slowing or stopping the cell cycle. Carotenoids can even make melanoma cells self-destruct. They're also what gives carrots their vivid orange coloring. Yeah, in other words, your skin would be orange. So, with all these changes to your body, would you be able to visit Earth? Well, Mars wouldn't have the same type of bacteria and viruses that the Earth does. So your immune system would be weaker than that of an Earthling's, which means Earth could be a dangerous place for you. And even if your immune system were strong, the gravity of Earth would be too much for your brittle bones. If you were born on Mars, you'd probably have to stay there. Humans have looked the same for a very long time, but within a few generations of living on Mars, we could have orange, nearsighted humans who could survive on less oxygen. And once we successfully settle on Mars, we probably wouldn't stop there. In the future, humans could have settlements on all sorts of planets, even outside the solar system. There you have it. Venus and Mars are all right tonight. But let's shift our eyes to Mercury for a second. Mercury is the closest planet to the Sun, so you'd expect it to be 1,000,000 times hotter than Venus, wouldn't you? Well, keep watching because the answer is going to shock you. You know what else will shock you? A mug with an iPhone strapped to a guy's face, or a t-shirt that says, "Everybody dies." Well, if you head to the Underknown shop, you can get plenty of merch just like this and more. Not only will you be supporting the channel, but you can also impress your friends with some cool stuff. All right, now let me ask you a question. Does Mercury have A, longer days than Earth, B, shorter years than Earth, or C, the same orbiting speed as Earth? Mercury is like the little brother of all the planets. Our tiny little friend is a little harder to study from Earth because it's so close to the Sun, but trust me when I tell you, it's a special place. And since Mercury is far too dangerous for you and me to go to, you already know who I'm sending instead. Mercury is a strange, hot mess of a planet. This rock is the closest one to the Sun, but its surface temperatures can plummet to as low as minus 180 degrees Celsius. It has the strangest sunrises and sunsets in the entire solar system, and one day on this planet lasts about 2 years. But you don't have to survive a whole day down there. We're sending our team member Chase on a mission to spend just 5 seconds on Mercury.
Huh. Mercury doesn't sound so bad. I just don't get why it's so cold. It should be flaming hot.
Detecting extreme temperature fluctuations.
Yeah, Mercury is hot and cold at the same time. That's because instead of a proper atmosphere, Mercury has an exosphere. And this exosphere is almost as thin as the vacuum of space. It doesn't contain enough molecules to transfer heat around the planet, and that means surface temperatures go from one extreme to the other. During the day, the surface is blasted by intense sunlight, and that results in severe heat, like 430 degrees Celsius. Then at night, all that heat gets lost in space and the temperatures drop to minus 180 degrees Celsius.
Well, at least there's no dust storms on Mercury.
Sure, there's no weather and no climate on this planet, but there are plenty of things that can kill you. Extreme heat, intense cold, lack of breathable air, severe solar radiation, and if anything goes wrong with your spacesuit, you'll be toast.
Toast or popsicle, depending on where I land. You know what? I've died way too many times to go out there without prep. Rico, fire up the simulatoratron.
X-29 Sim on standby.
Simulatoratron. Fine. Run the thing. Find me the safest place to land, please, Rico. Chop chop.
Yeah, finding a perfect landing spot on Mercury won't be easy. Mercury is the smallest planet in the solar system, even smaller than Saturn's moon Titan. And its terrain is just as bumpy as its temperature fluctuations. It has so many craters, cliffs, and ridges that finding a flat surface to land on will be a big if. Then, of course, there's the lack of atmosphere, which makes landing even bumpier. Without air resistance, your spaceship will be approaching the surface at a very high speed. So if you're not interested in crashing, you'll need a spaceship with a powerful propulsion system to slow you down during descent. And Mercury's proximity to the Sun complicates things even more. That's because the Sun's enormous gravity causes this planet to orbit the star on an elliptical path. That means that sometimes Mercury is closer to the Sun and other times it's further away. So landing on Mercury would be like trying to hit a moving target while being pulled strongly by the Sun, all the while trying to manage your speed in a place where you can't just parachute down. Yeah, it's hard. If you managed to drop down onto Mercury during its daytime, it would feel like you landed in an oven. The sun on this side of the planet is so incredibly intense that it will roast you alive. And Mercury's daytime lasts a long time. To be specific, one solar day on this planet goes for 176 Earth days. Weirdly, that's twice as long as 1 year on Mercury, as it only takes 88 Earth days to revolve around the sun. Of course, there's no way you'd last a full Mercury day. You'd cook within minutes. Now, even NASA's spacewalk suits are designed to withstand temperatures of 120 degrees Celsius. Mercury is 3.5 times more scorching than that. Your spacesuit's outer layers would start degrading within seconds. In minutes, your suit's critical systems like life support and cooling would fail, and you'd experience instant heat stroke. Then you'd be cooked and die.
Oh, so you're saying I could last 5 seconds on there? That's all I needed to hear. Rico, initiate landing sequence.
I don't recommend that. Your chances of returning to the ship after a 5-second walk on Mercury's daytime surface are, calculating, 0.012%.
Rico, oh my god, you just had to ruin all the fun every time. Okay, what are my other options?
Calculating. Try landing on Mercury's night side.
Okay.
Detecting the temperature of minus 180 degrees Celsius.
Even your spacesuit's most advanced heating system wouldn't last long in this brutal environment. Within minutes, your heaters would fail and hypothermia would set in. Your body temperature would start dropping rapidly. In only 10 minutes, you'd be dead. And that's if nothing else goes wrong.
Yeah, landing on Mercury's night side is possible, but it would suck. Like, I wouldn't see a thing there. What's the point in going to a whole new planet if you can't enjoy the views? No, I'll take my chances with Mercury's extreme heat. Thank you very much.
Well, hold on. Maybe you don't have to. You could find a landing location between the two extremes. It's called the Terminator Zone.
Ah, the Terminator Zone!
Yeah. This is the zone between the day and night, and temperatures there might be bearable. That's true, but this is your best shot at spending 5 seconds on Mercury. And hey, remember I mentioned the strange sunrises and sunsets on Mercury? Well, here's your chance to see them too. Mercury has a double sunrise. It's because it moves on its axis very slowly but orbits the sun very quickly. At certain points, the orbital speed becomes faster than its rotational speed. And if you were standing on Mercury at that moment, you'd see the sunrise, then stop, move back, and rise again.
Oh, cool! Double sunrise! Rico, okay, let's do this. Let's land, this time for real.
Landing complete. The temperature reading at 130 degrees Celsius.
Okay, yeah, feeling toasty, but not cooked. Another successful mission for the Astro King and his dumb sidekick Rico. Okay, so when do we get to see this double sunrise?
You must remain on Mercury's surface for a few hours to witness the retrograde sunrise.
Oh, why didn't you say that before we landed? Okay, well, I mean, it's not that bad. I could stick around here for a few hours.
I don't recommend that. The temperature will rise drastically in 3.2 hours.
God, Rico, just say 3 hours. It's fine. I'll be fine, okay? I'll stay right here next to the ship where... Ow! Okay, that rock is hot. Don't read into that. Nice. Rico, what was that?
A micrometeorite hit your spacesuit. You're losing oxygen.
Sky, hot, can't breathe. Why can't I ever get hit by a macro meteorite? Why does this always take so long? I didn't even see the double sunrise. I hope What If Guy puts it on his Patreon because I subscribed last month at the Red Giant Deer. And then pitched a story where I don't die.
Oh, classic Chase. But don't worry, he'll be back for his next adventure. He always comes back. When it comes to planets in our solar system's habitable zone, one world is too close to the sun, another is too far, and Earth is just right. But maybe things would be different if Venus and Mars simply swapped orbits. What makes these planets impossible to live on right now? What changes would they undergo when they traded places? And why would you need Jupiter to give these planets a chance at supporting life? This is What If, and here's what would happen if Venus and Mars swapped orbits. Our solar system's habitable zone, otherwise known as the Goldilocks zone, is the distance from a star where liquid water could exist on the surface of a planet. As long as conditions aren't too hot or too cold, life could be possible, just like on Earth. But simply occupying prime real estate in the habitable zone isn't a guarantee that a rocky planet is actually habitable. Both Venus and Mars orbit within this region too, and yet no life. Despite being of a similar size and with roughly the same surface gravity as Earth, Venus is too hot to hold liquid water. And dense. Its atmosphere is 90 times denser than our own, and the surface temperature is a scorching 462 degrees Celsius. On the other end of the Goldilocks zone, Mars is also quite Earth-like, except way colder, drier, and dustier. Its average surface temperature is minus 46 degrees Celsius, and it has an atmosphere about 1% as thick as Earth's. So if we swapped things around, would Venus and Mars transform themselves into perfectly livable planets? Bringing the red planet into Venus's orbit would put it at a distance of approximately 108 million kilometers from the Sun. This would bring it halfway closer to the Sun than it was before. Being so much closer, Mars would get a significant boost in the amount of sunlight it receives, and that alone can make the surface temperature climb to a balmy 32 degrees Celsius, just like the Earth's tropics. But without a thick atmosphere or oceans, all this new heat wouldn't stay on the planet. Just like in Earth's deserts, Mars would see extreme temperature differences between day and night. The thin Martian atmosphere would make it difficult for water to stay liquid. With such a low surface pressure, water would boil at a lower temperature. Evaporation would happen much quicker. Looks like if you want to see life flourish on Mars, you'd have to take a slightly more hands-on approach. But first, let's check out how Venus is doing in its new neck of the woods. You'd now find Venus located 228 million kilometers away from the Sun. That's twice as far as it used to be. And naturally, you'd think, surely this scorching planet would be starting to cool down. Well, as it turns out, the planet's high surface temperatures have a lot more to do with its thick atmosphere than its overall closeness to the Sun. Venus has a very high albedo, which means that it reflects about 75% of the incoming sunlight. So it could be that the planet's temperature remains more or less just as hot as before. Even as the upper parts of the atmosphere slowly cool enough for the albedo effect to decrease, that would mean that Venus could now absorb a larger amount of incoming sunlight, so that temperature wouldn't start to drop all that much. Another setback on the road to becoming a life-supporting planet would be that Venus's atmosphere is mostly comprised of carbon dioxide, with small amounts of nitrogen and clouds of sulfuric acid. What you still wouldn't find nearly enough of is water. The concentration of water in Venus's atmosphere is 100 times too low for even the most resilient organisms back on Earth to survive. But since you went through all the effort of bringing both planets from one end of the habitable zone to the other, why not take things a little further? You could try terraforming the planets to make them a little more livable. One way you could increase the surface pressure of Mars would be to try releasing all the carbon dioxide found in its soil and minerals. The only problem here is that the red planet would need to reach temperatures above 300 degrees Celsius. And despite this new location so close to the Sun, Mars would never get this hot. Besides, if you could release all of that precious greenhouse gas, it would only amount to an atmospheric pressure of about 10 to 14% of Earth's. There simply isn't enough carbon dioxide on the red planet. Even if you had been successful with that effort, you'd still be unable to breathe on Mars. One option for dealing with this would involve bringing special microorganisms to the planet that could convert the hostile Martian atmosphere into breathable air. This would be similar to what Earth was like 2.5 billion years ago. Back then, cyanobacteria converted our methane and ammonia-rich atmosphere into the oxygen-rich one you enjoy today. But ultimately, this would be a big waste of time and resources. You'd find that with Mars's weak magnetic field, it wouldn't be able to hold on to any atmosphere you could create. That would be thanks to the power of solar winds that would constantly strip away whatever atmosphere you'd managed to generate. And sitting in Venus's old orbit, solar winds would be almost 5 times as dense as Mars is used to. Way out on Venus, the question of creating conditions for life could come down to whether you could manage to form an ocean on the planet. And that would entail bombarding the atmosphere with hydrogen. As hydrogen is introduced to the atmosphere, it would react with the carbon dioxide, leading to the formation of water. Introduce enough hydrogen and you could eventually see Venus with 80% of its surface covered in water. For this to work, you'd need a lot of hydrogen. So much that you'd probably need to find a way to harvest it from a gas giant like Jupiter or Saturn, or maybe one of their moons. Yeah, I'm not sure all this planet moving and hydrogen bombarding was really worth it. You'd still be left with only one Goldilocks planet capable of supporting life.
Okay, jump back to the trivia question I asked you about Mercury. Does Mercury have A, longer days than Earth, B, shorter years than Earth, or C, the same orbiting speed as Earth? Well, I might have tricked you a little. As you found out, both A and B are correct. Mercury has longer days and hotter years than we do. I bet you didn't even know that was possible. Okay, now that we've seen all the rocky planets and have a clearer picture of them, well, let's go back and cause some trouble. We talked a bit about babies being born on Mars, but what if there was life on Venus? Venusian beings would be very different from us. For one, they'd look different, but also they'd have abilities we could never even imagine. Think about it. We breathe oxygen, drink water, and sit in the sun. We're able to fully appreciate Earth without wearing spacesuits because our bodies were built for this planet. Now, what if the Venusians need to drink 8 cups of sulfuric acid a day? Or maybe their bodies are built to only survive on scorching hot ground. A lot of times when we think of life on other planets, we're imagining it through the eyes of humans. You and I need oxygen to survive, but that doesn't mean every living being does.
Is alien life really out there? Humanity has wondered about it for decades. And according to scientists, it might finally be a reality. Astronomers have discovered there could be life on Venus. Does this mean we finally meet aliens? Could this help us discover other aliens? And what does this discovery mean for us? This is What If, and here's what would happen if there's life on Venus. Venus might not be as alien as you think. The planet is roughly the same size as Earth, and its gravity is 91% of our planet's. We always talk about Mars being a potential home for humans, but we shouldn't count out Venus either. And if there is life on the planet, could this speed up our process of making it our new home? First, let's look into why exactly scientists think there might be life on Venus. It all has to do with phosphine. This is a colorless, flammable, and explosive gas that's also pretty stinky. It smells like a mix of garlic and decaying fish. Ugh. This gas can be found on Earth, and it's dangerous to everything that uses oxygen to survive. It was used as a chemical weapon during World War I and is a byproduct of cooking methamphetamine. Yeah, this gas is not very pleasant, and it can be extremely deadly, but now astronomers have found that phosphine might be in Venus's atmosphere. At first glance, this might seem like a terrible thing because this gas kills anything that breathes oxygen. But that doesn't mean that life can't exist. Just because something doesn't require oxygen doesn't mean it's completely lifeless. Inside Venus's clouds of phosphine, there could be anaerobic bacteria. These are organisms that don't require oxygen to survive. They could be living on Venus, producing this phosphine gas. Keep in mind that all of this is not fully verified yet, but astronomers have been keeping an eye on Venus for nearly all of 2020, and this is what they think they've discovered. So, if this type of alien life really did exist on Venus, what would it mean for us humans? Well, when you first hear about alien life, you probably think about Martians with big heads and us being able to shake their hands, but that wouldn't be possible with these life forms on Venus. As it stands right now, we wouldn't be able to see any of the life on Venus with our naked eye. It's all bacteria and microbes. And with all that potential phosphine on the planet, it makes visiting Venus more dangerous for humans than ever. So, will we be meeting this life form anytime soon? Probably not. Is this discovery still incredibly exciting? Absolutely. Yay! And sure, it's discouraging that we haven't found Martians yet, but try not to be too disappointed. When discovering potential alien life, we should remember to expand our ideas about what exactly these alien life forms could be. They don't necessarily have to be something with 2 or 4 legs that humans are able to interact with. The possibilities for potential alien life are endless. Things we can't even imagine yet. And who knows what this current life form could turn into? It may start small, but in millions of years, we might see Venus bloom into a planet full of organic life. And life on Venus might not be limited to organisms living in phosphine gas either. Experts think that due to all the extreme climates on the planet, life could form almost anywhere. And that goes for the rest of the solar system too. With scientists discovering potential life on Venus, who knows what else is out there? Researchers will just have to keep searching to find out. If you were to drill straight down into Mars, what would you find? Would the red planet reveal its true colors? Would you finally discover life on Mars? And how would drilling through Mars compare to drilling on Earth? This is What If? And here's what would happen if we drilled through Mars. This is the Jezero crater on Mars. And 3.5 billion years ago, it looked very different. It used to be an ancient river delta that carried clay minerals into the crater lake. It might have even hosted Martian life. Fast forward to now, and the Jezero crater has become a perfect landing site for NASA's shiny new rover. Meet Perseverance. If I were to search for past life forms on Mars, this is the place I'd start looking too. Only instead of collecting rock samples, I'd send a rover to drill through the surface. What's the worst that could happen? Did you know that Mars has Marsquakes? They're like earthquakes, but on Mars. NASA's Martian lander called InSight detected 480 of these Marsquakes in 2020 alone. Luckily, there isn't much out there to damage. For us, these Marsquakes are a good thing. Expect the unexpected. The next discovery you'd make is that the crust layer on Mars is thinner than the one on Earth. Remember InSight? This little lander indicated that the Martian crust is only around 20 or 37 kilometers thick. Compare that to the Earth's crust, which is approximately 40 to 50 kilometers thick under the continents. If water still exists in liquid form on Mars, it could be several kilometers inside this crust. And there are radioactive elements in the liquid mantle below the crust. These elements release geothermal heat through their decay, and it should be enough heat to melt thick sheets of subsurface ice. This geothermal heat could be why there was liquid water on Mars 4 billion years ago, even though the surface temperatures were below freezing. But enough theory, let's keep drilling. Boring through Mars would be even harder than drilling through Earth. The deepest we've ever drilled on Earth was 12.2 kilometers into its crust, and that came with high budget costs, technical difficulties, and plenty of bad luck. But on Mars, this would be an unimaginably tricky endeavor. The InSight lander tried drilling, but it encountered unexpected soil properties. The drill probe was trying to go 5 meters deep, but could only go a fraction of the distance before popping out. Then there was Curiosity. It experienced a mechanical error. The drill feed mechanism that was supposed to move the drill bit forward wasn't moving when commanded. Luckily, scientists designed a new, more human form of Martian drilling. Now, the rover uses the force of its robotic arm to push the drill bit into the surface as it spins. But don't get your hopes high about reaching the mantle of Mars too soon. It took Curiosity the entire day to drill a mere 5-centimeter hole. Based on that, going 5 kilometers down would take up to 300 years. And you'd need a bigger drill. There's still so much we have to learn about Mars, but maybe drilling isn't the most effective way to do it.
If I asked you to name a major city, you'd probably think of something like New York, Mumbai, or Tokyo. Well, today we're heading in a different direction and building cities on Venus and Mars. And these aren't your typical vacation spots. Venus's city has a special twist, actually. Here's a little spoiler. Their biggest city won't even be on the ground. Imagine looking out your window and being surrounded by clouds. You'd probably sleep like a baby. But then again, there are bigger and better plans to live on Mars. How about we leave the decision up to you? We'll show you a Venusian city and then a Martian city, and you can decide where to live.
The Earth might not be here forever. A huge solar flare, an asteroid impact, or a local gamma ray burst, anything could wipe us out for good. If we're looking for some place to escape to, there is one planet in our solar system that's somewhat similar to Earth, though we don't know much about it. No, it's not Mars, it's Venus. Not only are Earth and Venus about the same size, they both have identical interiors with partially liquid cores, mantles, and crusts. Yet Venus happens to be the most hostile terrestrial planet in the solar system. But what if I told you that you could explore this hot planet without ever setting foot on it? This is What If? And here's what would happen if we built cloud cities on Venus. Venus isn't a place you'd want to land on. Thanks to its dense atmosphere and turtle-like rotation, the surface temperature of Venus stays at 462 degrees. The planet's atmospheric pressure is 92 times greater than Earth's. Because of such high pressure, anything entering the atmosphere of Venus gets immediately crushed before it reaches the planet's volcanic surface. With such extreme atmospheric conditions, it's too dangerous to attempt a manned landing on Venus, but we wouldn't need to go down there. Above the dense layer of clouds, Venus isn't that bad. The atmospheric pressure is similar to Earth's, the gravity is slightly lower, and the temperature reaches 75 degrees. Although that's a little hot, it's still workable. Now, how would we get there? Well, we'd need to start small. According to NASA's plan for exploring Venus, we'd send 2 spaceships to our destination. Venus is the closest planet to Earth. That's why it would only take 100 days for the craft to arrive there. One of the ships would be run by robots. It would carry a special airship that would eject into the atmosphere upon arrival. This airship would start to inflate itself with helium. And since helium is lighter than air, the airship would float, orbiting about 52 kilometers above the planet. The second spaceship would have a crew of 2 people. It would link up with the airship orbiting Venus. The crew would have 30 days to make all the environmental assessments. After that, they'd detach from the airship and start making their way back to Earth. The return trip would take about 300 days due to the Sun's strong gravitational pull. But even with that, the complete mission wouldn't take longer than 450 days. After analyzing the information from the first mission, we'd begin to plan our next trip to Venus. But this time, we'd stay there longer. The next crew would have a year to study the planet and its atmosphere. One of the things they'd be looking for on Venus would be life. Scientists think that because microbes on Earth can thrive in acidic conditions surrounded by sulfur, there could be life found in the Venusian atmosphere. After the end of the second mission, we would start preparing to stay on Venus permanently. We would begin building cloud cities, where future generations of humans would live and hopefully continue to explore space and the origins of life in it.
It's one of humanity's most ambitious undertakings, created to extend human exploration to the farthest reaches of our solar system.
The next step in space exploration isn't generations away. It's happening right now. And our destination? That mysterious and desolate world next door, Mars. Imagine starting life over on that tiny red dot, over 265 million kilometers away. What would happen if we built a city on Mars? Would you have to live underground? How many people would you live with? And what would the Martian economy look like? This is What If, and here's what would happen if we built a city on Mars. Since 1975, the only things from Earth making claims on Mars are robots and satellites. But now, Elon Musk and his company SpaceX are looking to change that story. Their goal? To create a city with a government, trade, and culture on Mars. This plan involves 1,000 spaceships and even more brave new recruits. By surviving in lower gravity with fewer people and only limited supplies, living on Mars might change how we could adapt to dwindling resources on Earth. But with so much depending on the early stages of planning and supply runs, could life on Mars be sustainable? Every great city starts small, whether you're talking about the little fishing town of Hong Kong or a hut village named Rome. So, if you want this Martian colony to grow into a thriving city, you're going to need more than a handful of people. According to the Bordeaux Institut National Polytechnique, you would need at least 110 settlers to start this adventure. The SpaceX plan starts with 2 spaceships carrying 100 people each. With this handful of explorers, your city would have just enough people to build more habitats and research stations without putting your resources in danger. If you run out of food at this stage, that's the end of the experiment. The biggest challenge this city faces is becoming sustainable without relying on regular shipments from Earth, which will only come every few years. You see, with the egg-shaped orbit of Mars, it takes 687 Earth days to make one Martian year. Supply runs would only launch when Earth and Mars align, which happens every 2 years, to cut down on travel time between our worlds. And after this nearly 8-month-long trip, there's still a chance of losing all those supplies when the rocket lands. Since the gravity on Mars is only 3/8 of the pull on Earth, landing safely on the surface of Mars would be dangerous. And that doesn't take into account the amount of dust flying in the air. After all, the dust on the Moon was bad enough, and it got into crew members' eyes and damaged systems on their spacecraft. But kicking up the dust on Mars might be even more deadly, since each grain is highly oxidized and electrically charged. But hey, you made it to Mars safely. Now, what are you gonna eat? The chlorinated soils on Mars are toxic, and if you ingested them with your food, you might damage your thyroid gland. So that means farming is out. Outdoor farming, at least. Well, before you worry about eating, you'll need to set up protection from the harsh conditions on Mars. With an atmosphere made of 95% carbon dioxide, the air on Mars is toxic. And don't forget about the intense radiation on the surface. With more exposure to radiation and no breathable air, you won't be able to survive without a controlled environment. Thankfully, with the help of those rocks under your feet, you have all the protection you need. Just 5 meters of the surface materials on Mars, called regolith, provides the same amount of shielding from radiation as Earth's atmosphere. This material would be processed into cement to create layered walls using robots and 3D printers. This material would be a protective shell, and underneath that shell, domed science facilities, living spaces, and all your home comforts. Connected by tubes, these domes would provide you shelter from the raging dust storms outside, which might last for months. Even with this technology, Elon Musk claims it could take up to 10 years to establish a colony. But it's during this time that your quaint Martian village would grow into the first human city beyond Earth. Since this world isn't being drilled or fracked, the power grid on Mars can be made sustainable right from the start. We would set up solar arrays for electricity and use natural gases like methane for engines. Our footprint on Mars could start low and stay that way, no matter how many people live there. And now you better figure out a way to feed all these people. The low gravity on Mars might decrease your muscle mass. To keep your body healthy, you'll need to provide more protein. You'll have to serve the equivalent of 110 cooked chicken breasts and 660 carrots every day. If one of these domes contained an indoor farm, you could raise the chickens you need to feed your city. And you would have the most nutrient-rich manure available. If you used this manure in the greenhouses, you'd have a way to fertilize your crops year-round. But how could you irrigate those crops? How would you get water? Scientists still debate whether liquid water exists below the ice caps on Mars, but if it does exist, that freshwater source could be filtered for the colonists to use for irrigation. With less gravity on Mars pulling water down into the ground, you would need less water to keep your plants alive than you would on Earth, since it would stay closer to the surface. And with supplies being transported only every 2 years, having spring water available on Mars would change how the city would operate. It would create a government infrastructure to distribute and oversee the water supply and employ scientists to manage the filtration needs. Now, the city has an infrastructure in place and jobs to fill, so how would you value your time in terms of cash? How could you pay for products or services? Cash weighs too much to travel with in outer space, and credit cards would require Wi-Fi services communicating back to Earth. With a 14-minute gap in communications between Mars and Earth, you're gonna need something more locally based. Well, you might have to use a cryptocurrency known as Mars coin, but you would have need to have bought it with your Earth money before you boarded the spaceship. While Mars coin would only be available to Martians, this money would help build the government, increase trade, and create a standard of living. With society on Mars still new, maybe you could trade your services or learn to barter goods instead of relying on this cash system. If we do things right, life on Mars might be the model for future civilizations, free from the constraints of the culture built on Earth.
All right, now you're an official rock star. Get it? Because you visited the rocky planets, so you're a rock star? No? Our friend Chase is absolutely exhausted from his space trips today, so you know we're going to set him up with some more. That's why we created a brand new channel just for him. It's called Chase Dies in Space, and it's on YouTube now. In our first episode, Chase builds a burger restaurant on the moon. Try that, Mr. Beast. It was one small step for burgers and one giant leap for burger kind. We're going to be setting him up with the most insane challenges. Oh, you thought today was brutal? You won't believe the kind of situations we're going to put this guy through. You have got to check that channel out. And make sure to like and subscribe to me for more What If episodes, where we take you through space, time, and everything in between. That's it for today, folks. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.